I grew up in St. Louis, which was a town that had an amazing World's Fair in 1904. 20 million people before the kind of modern transportation that we have visited St. Louis. And it's still today, over 100 years, 120 something years or whatever, is still a powerful kind of example of what can be done in a community, in a city. There's so many aspects of the World's Fair that have survived. And then in 2010, when I moved to Chicago and we moved our headquarters of Clayco, of our very fast growing business, to better serve kind of the nation and our customers, I also became very, very aware of the legacy of World Fairs in Chicago, which hosted two that, again, still has a very broad impact. People are knowledgeable about these World's Fairs and the impact. In fact, President Obama is building his presidential center at Jackson Park, which was the site of one of the World's Fairs where the University of Chicago is. And so, I was aware of World's Fairs. I'd been in the last 35 years or something really growing the business I started from scratch into what is today one of the largest design build construction companies in North America. And we currently employ about 4,000 people, and we have about 18,000 people on our job sites every day. And I was more or less, kind of minding my business, running the business and growing the business and dealing with COVID, in fact. And I got a phone call from the UAE, the USA ambassador to the UAE, John Ricolta. I know Giovanni's good friends with Ambassador Ricolta. Also, he was actually the Trump appointee, a competitor in the business world in the United States, because they have a very large building company called Wallbridge. And he had been serving as the ambassador and also as the commissioner general for the USA Pavilion. He was instrumental in working with Her Excellency and with the Expo, kind of putting together the theme for the USA Pavilion and building that. And he believed that he would be the commissioner general because it was supposed to be in 2020. And so when it was delayed and when President Biden was elected, he was kind of called back. And he basically started the conversation, I think, both at the White House and with me about, that this would be a great opportunity for me. So I was familiar with the expos. I dug in right away. I loved the theme, connecting minds, creating the future, which the UAE put together, this incredible concept and thematic approach to mobility, opportunity, and sustainability, to build a theme around the thing that all the 192 countries that would participate could really build on. And then they had a really terrific program around various themes, including, International Women's event, I think in the first week in March, all the way back, sustainability, climate change, so many different themes. But this was a core focus of all of the countries to be able to have an opportunity to bring their best people, their innovators, their political folks around these particular themes, so you could really get focused. So I heard about this. I really dug in and studied it, and I just got really enthused to be part of it. And so the White House, I went through the vetting, and then I actually had to resign from my company, all of my boards, to be sworn in at the State Department. And originally there was maybe going to be a little bit of training or whatever, but I only had a week to get ready before the thing started. So I was sworn in, and I think I flew over the very next day to Dubai, where I was very warmly received by Expo 2020 Dubai and Giovanni, and I met a bunch of people to kind of help get me, get my feet on the ground there. And I think the most important thing for me was that, I saw this as just a once in a lifetime opportunity to contribute. And so I made a commitment to never leave, to be there every day. I think I only took 10 days off, over 7 months, and just made it my mission to meet as many people as I could, make as many connections as I could, to participate in the UAE's theme, and to, I visited all 192 countries. I doubt there's very many commissioner generals that actually did that. I know Giovanni visited all of them more than once, but it was a full-time job to be able to make a commitment to go out and meet people. I met people, I logged meetings with people from 170 countries. And honestly, I'm not sure I knew there were 170 countries that existed before I went over. Commissioner General is for all the nations. I guess everybody has a Commissioner General, or some maybe had pavilion directors, appointed usually by their government to be the government official at a very specific location. So there's the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi. There's a consulate in Dubai. And this is U.S. State Department initiative. The U.S. government is represented, and my official duty was to represent President Biden. And during the time I was in the UAE, there was not an ambassador. So I was the top U.S. White House appointed official in the country. So I did participate in a good number of bilateral meetings, because the UAE also did something very wise, I think, and they made the Expo site their main point of contact for all of their bilateral meetings during the time. So they were very present with everybody from the leadership of the UAE, from all of the Emirates, held their official meetings, their governmental meetings, and then each country has a national day. This is a great opportunity for each country to bring their leadership. President Biden had a delegation that was led by Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, who was fantastic. So my role was really to represent the United States of America on behalf of the White House, but also, which I didn't know, was really the CEO role of managing over 225 people, 40,000 square foot facility. We had 1.2 million visitors come through the building. We had a giant event space where we had over 7,500 business people at business events, connecting, to your point, Boeing, Honeywell, Pepsi, Marriott, Hilton, many American corporations came over, were present, and, we facilitated, developing relationships with Middle Eastern governments, countries, and other businesses to do joint venture partnerships. So there was a government purpose, a business purpose, and I think also winning the hearts and minds of the world. We've got, an opportunity to present our innovation, our values. We had the Quran. We had Thomas Jefferson's Quran. First time it ever left the Library of Congress. We had an actual rock from the moon that you could touch. And kind of when I first got there, I came into this in the middle. I thought some of these things were a little gimmicky, but I have to tell you, I touched the moon rock almost every day. It's not a gimmick.
Wow.
It gives you a superpower. And seeing the people's face, some 7-year-old kid or some 70-year-old man from India, like touching the moon and getting this spark of ingenuity, really is about the theme that Her Excellency really put forward about connecting people and creating the future.
Let me ask you,
and I think just to add on to that real quick, this was also an opportunity for soft diplomacy where other kind of hard diplomacy maybe doesn't even work. When I got to the UAE, as an example, I had previously received an invitation to go to the French pavilion for a gathering of commissioner generals. And at the time, there was a fracas between the US and France and Australia over some submarine technology that was sold. And the countries were withdrawing their diplomats from each other's embassies and that sort of thing. It was very tense, very highly tense thing. And when I got ready to go, I had some protocol advice that maybe I shouldn't go. I'm like, I'm gonna go. I don't really, I don't really work for any of these people here. So I went to the event, and when I walked in, the commissioner general was stunned that I was there. He was like, wait a minute. He goes, I can't even believe you're here. And I go, well, I heard you have unbelievable cheese and wine at this event. And he just started laughing. He said, could you take a picture with the flag? And I said, of course I can, as long as I'm going to get the cheese and wine. So, but I was very aware that this was a soft diplomacy opportunity. And we actually became, had a very strong bond after that. And I think, these things help in the bigger sense of how these connections are made. It's all about communication, and all of our businesses are relationship driven. And sometimes you have to break through all the noise, and various leaders and businesses, when they start really communicating. I tell you an interesting story I was over in Paris like 10 days ago, bidding, doing our first proposal for the bid for Minnesota. And the day before, I happened to have an opportunity to meet a delegation from South Korea who were competing for 2030. They invited me, so of course I went. And during the course of the conversation, I learned that the head of the Chamber of Commerce for South Korea is one of my largest clients in the United States. So they're building, SK Industries is building one of the largest battery factory complexes in the world in Commerce, Georgia, and I'm the builder on that project. So there's so many, it was just a total coincidence. But this gets to your point about these connections and business leaders kind of meeting kind of face to face and making these connections that, who knows what will happen in the future with these businesses. And if there's a misunderstanding, which there often is in construction, I've made this connection where I can pick the phone up and call the head of the company and say, hey, let's get these.
Right.
I made the most powerful moments happened at the USA Pavilion, dealing with hearing stories. I think I became a better listener over there than I have been maybe the last 5 or 10 years. When you're running a big company, sometimes you stop being as good of a listener as you need to be. But over there, I was like on new ground, and just hearing everyday stories about people's goals, people's objectives, what they're, I met all these people from all these different countries, and I got to become a pretty good interviewer, asking people what were the biggest changes that happened in their lifetime in their country, what is their perception of America. And it was just a great, humbling experience for me to get also, you hear about climate change, but when you are talking to people who are in the center of gravity, in the depths of the problems of climate change, people in the Fiji Islands who are, this is their entire livelihood of their countries. So there were, I wouldn't say one specific moment as much as these powerful interactions, listening to other people talk about their challenges. It made me very, very grateful to be an American. Sometimes in America, we're, especially, it's been a very challenging handful of years in the country. Not that America hasn't always had challenges, but people get cynical. It's definitely more polarized and divided and becoming more, quite frankly, hateful in some ways. And it can be depressing. But I can tell you when you're overseas and you're listening to people's reaction and their kind of their premise of hope that they have about America, and the American dream is very much alive around the world. It's very humbling. And I felt more grateful to be an American than, and just lucky, and also like a big responsibility to uphold the ideals and the goals that the rest of the world has for America. So that was kind of probably the biggest takeaway for me. Jump in and answer the question real quick. I think there's two things. I mean, we had the world's top scientists and, technologists, and, we met people from Google and Microsoft, and there were people from Westinghouse and from Honeywell, and people really on the front leading edge of hydrogen development. And so for me, I think some of the main takeaways were how big the challenge really is to address climate change, how much technology still has to be advanced for us to really tackle these problems. I think also, I came away more convinced than ever that the negative perception towards nuclear energy is got to be, turned around, because without nuclear energy, we're not going to be able to really wean ourselves off of oil and gas, certainly in our lifetimes. And the other thing that really was powerful for me was the women's the women's rights that are being addressed around the world, not quickly enough, but some giant countries who you wouldn't necessarily think might be best practices in these areas are really stepping forward. The UAE is making great strides. Saudi Arabia is making great strides. And in America, we're kind of going backwards. So I think there's going to be this constant challenge, but I thought the Expo did a great job of focusing on, especially at the Women's Pavilion, some of these critical issues that are impacting women around the world and how intertwined they are with so many other issues. The expos are a great opportunity for what I would call hand-to-hand communication instead of hand-to-hand combat. And that, it's a place where you can really energize the communication cycle, where you can really bring people together, both from a government, a business, and then just the people of the world to educate and to spark kind of the future interest in some 8-year-old kid who may be the scientist that cracks the code in climate change. So for me, it's just all about that high level of communication that, and that's true in business